So I recently finished part 8 of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, Jojolion, and that means that I'm caught up with the entire manga at the time of this recording. I thought to commemorate this momentous occasion, it would be a fun idea to rank all 8 parts from worst to best. I've done this type of ranking before with Hunter x Hunter arcs, and I figured why not try to repeat the same formula one more time. Also, I'm really obsessed with lists in general. I don't really know why. Of course, this entire video is just my opinion. Maybe I have one part ranked a bit higher or lower than you would have ranked it, but that doesn't mean I'm presenting that as an objective fact. It's literally just how I personally feel after having read and watched through the series. I know most people are reasonable and understand that, but there are always crazy people who want to crucify you for having your own thoughts. Of course, I'd love it if you'd all tell me your personal rankings in the comments, but please don't be absolutely insane about it. I also want to add the small disclaimer that I do actually enjoy every single part of JoJo, even the part that I ranked the lowest on this list, which I genuinely don't really think is a very good piece of media objectively. I can still enjoy some aspects of it, and I understand why some people might actually be fond of it. Plus, every part has memes, so how can I not enjoy them? With all that being said, let's just get right into the list. Spoilers for every part, by the way. I'm sure most people could have seen this one coming. At number 8, the lowest on this list, I'm gonna have to put part 1, Phantom Blood. I'm just gonna be completely honest, this is not a very good manga or anime, and it is the main reason why people find it very difficult to get into JoJo, or why people like to skip parts instead of just reading from the beginning. Araki is a mangaka who is amazing at evolving over time, which is wonderful and is part of why JoJo is so good. But that unfortunately means that his first installment in the series is pretty subpar. There are a couple things that really drag down Phantom Blood in my mind. Hamon is so boring in this part and is nowhere near stands as a power system, in my opinion. Lots of characters, including the protagonist Jonathan, come off as either incredibly bland or just complete caricatures. The only character I like is Dio, and I guess Speedwagon because he's best girl. And the plot just isn't interesting. Main characters die and we don't care as an audience because they're not good characters. The side villains are boring as hell, and I'll just come out and say it, we don't want vampires. All JoJo fans want are stans, rock people, and flamboyant Italian men. Is that too much to ask for? The only thing that saves part 1 for me are the memes. Because it's so ridiculous, the memes from this part are absolutely immaculate.
Hey baby! Goodbye, JoJo!
It pains me to put part 1 this low because Jonathan's just such a nice guy, but part 2 is just part 1 but 10 times better, so I really can't put Phantom Blood any higher. At number 7, I have what is probably the most popular JoJo part 3, Stardust Crusaders. Now, I actually really enjoyed watching the anime for this part, and it was what made me really fall in love with JoJo, but god damn, there are a whole myriad of issues in retrospect. I'll keep it brief because next week's video is actually exclusively on this topic. The whole villain of the week structure for JoJo started here, and I feel this part was one of the worst at employing this technique effectively. I wasn't really into any of the side villains, and it was just boring to kind of just keep on having new fights every single episode or every other episode. They dragged on forever, and this part is really long because of it. The tone is really confusing. Bruh, they're desperately trying to save Jotaro's mom from this crazy 100-year-old vampire. But by the time they get to Egypt, half of the fights have been purely comedic in nature. It's really hard to take the part seriously when the tone is so all over the place. Some of the main characters also feel confusing or even wasted. Abdul is the perfect example. And bro, what the fuck is this ending? At first, I thought it was so hype that Jotaro could stop time, and then I realized how ridiculous of a resolution that is to the story. This is actually a problem I have with a couple different parts, so I'll keep on talking about it throughout the video. But while part 3 has some very obvious deficiencies, I still find it incredibly enjoyable in general. Fights can be hit or miss at times, but there are some absolute gems here. Polnareff versus Vanilla Ice, or Jotaro versus both of the Darby brothers, for example. And we have some of the most iconic JoJo characters like Jotaro, Joseph, Dio, and Polnareff. I think part 3 introduced a lot of the potential that later parts would fully realize, but itself ended up being quite basic when compared to those later installments. If anything, I think that's more of a testament to how good some of the later parts are and not purely a criticism of Stardust Crusaders. So I'm kind of cheating here, but I really can't decide what to put at number 5, so I'm going to leave it as a two-way tie between part 2, Battle Tendency, and part 5, Golden Wind. From these entries onwards, I don't really have a huge amount of gripes with the parts, and I'm mostly just going to be talking about the things that I really love from them. I feel like part 2 is essentially just part 1 done right, and part 5 is basically part 3 done right. That doesn't mean these newer parts are flawless by any definition of the word, but I felt that Araki kind of looked back at previous parts and made a concerted effort to improve on areas that were simply holding those parts back. Battle Tendency features Joseph Joestar, one of the best JoJo's in the entire series, and also introduces a cast of really diverse and lovable characters that we were honestly just missing from part 1. Sorry Speedwagon, I still love you baby boy. Oh wait, he's in this part, never mind. Hamon is a lot more interesting in this part in my opinion. I felt like Joseph and Caesar were just much more dynamic fighters than anyone we met in part 1, and Joseph in particular used his intellect to outsmart his opponents instead of just screaming, "Oh, like every other JoJo seems to do. Not that I have a problem with the auras, it's just kind of nice to have some variety, you know? The Pillar Men are really interesting villains in my opinion, especially Wamu with his concept of honor, and I just felt like the story flowed really well compared to some of parts that use the villain of the week structure. Battle Tendency is probably the most enjoyable part for me, and I think that goes a long way when judging how good one part is compared to others. Golden Wind is so incredibly different from Battle Tendency, and yet I find them really equally enjoyable and intriguing. I know the Incredible anime adaptation has really skyrocketed part 5 on some people's lists, but honestly I think the manga is amazing as well. Unfortunately, people have been stuck with really poor English translations for years, but now that the official volumes are releasing, that's not really a problem whatsoever. I love the darker tone of Golden Wind and how its setting is so far removed from the other parts, yet it still operates within the same logic in terms of stands and battles between them. And stands just keep on evolving with every part. We get some really fascinating ones here with Sticky Fingers, Moody Blues, Grateful Dead, King Crimson, White Album, Metallica, and the list just goes on and on. Honestly, I can name any stand from part 5 and I think there would be so much to analyze. And learning about the stand arrow and Requiem stands while simultaneously getting a cameo from Polnareff, how could you not love this part? I definitely won't say that it's perfect though. The villain of the week structure is better at times here, but it's still present and can be tedious. Giorno is probably the least compelling protagonist in the whole series. I feel like Bucciarati just completely outshines him as a character, and it's kind of ridiculous how this 15-year-old kid just wins every fight and becomes a level 100 mafia boss like a week after learning what a stand is. The ending was a bit rough for me as well. Diavolo wasn't introduced very early, so we weren't very invested in him. And then, compared to part 4's ending, which featured Josuke dissecting Kira's ability and also learning how to use his stand in ways that he never has before, instead of that, Giorno just stabs himself and instantly wins, which was exciting to a degree, but it was also really anticlimactic compared to what I was expecting. Overall, these are two of the most enjoyable parts of JoJo, and their flaws aren't very prominent in my thoughts on them, as I find it very easy just to sit down and enjoy them for what they are. They definitely aren't the best parts, but there's a reason why so many people are attached to them and love experiencing them over and over again. At number 4 is part 8, Jojolion. This was probably the most difficult part to rank since I finished it literally a week ago, so I haven't had a huge amount of time to reflect on all of its larger themes and such. Not that I did that with any of the other parts, I'm just a YouTuber, I don't actually know anything about anime. Anyways, I also found this part quite hard to rank because it kind of just confuses me a lot. The beginning was so hype and really got me excited to keep on reading, especially the first fight of the part between Soft and Wet and Fun. The stand abilities were just so unique and honestly just really complicated compared to previous parts. The ending was even more exciting, and I think Wonder Review is debatably the most interesting and unique stand in JoJo. I also really love the stand designs and characters throughout this part, and I think Araki's art just went to a whole new level while he was creating part 8. My main problem was that the middle of part 8 didn't really grab my attention in any way. There were some high points such as seeing Kira and Killer Queen, but after the Born This Way fight, I honestly got kind of bored of the part until Mamezuku Rai and then Toru showed up later on. To be fair, I think this was because I've been quite busy with real life commitments lately, hence why I haven't had a video out in a month, so I believe I'd find it a lot more enjoyable after rereading with the entire plot in mind. I was also slightly confused by the villains in this part. Most of the rock humans that were introduced were actually just side characters, and even Damo, with the absolutely insane stand Vitamin C, was dealt with rather quickly by Josuke and Hato. Jobin was an interesting villain in my opinion, but he's not always present and doesn't have any real fights as far as I remember, and while Wonder Review was an amazing stand, I was a bit confused by Toru's motivations and how he actually fit into the plot. Overall, Jojolion is a fascinating manga, and I believe I'm gonna enjoy it much more after rereading it. It has some of the highest peaks in all of JoJo, but also has a rather convoluted plot, and that makes it quite difficult to get into when compared to all the other parts that I ranked above it. Alright, here's my most controversial JoJo opinion, probably. At number 3, I have part 6, Stone Ocean. When I was reading through this part, it didn't even seem like a possibility in my mind that some people might dislike it or might rank it among some of the worst JoJo parts, but that's what I've seen from some people in the community. Honestly, I think part 6 is amazing. Jolene was one of the most compelling JoJo's in my opinion. She risked her life to save her dad even though he hadn't always treated her the best, and then eventually understood why he had acted that way, and she's maybe the most intelligent fighter of them all. Like, seriously, who thinks of turning their body into a Mobius strip when they're literally about to die? There are some other fantastic characters in this part, in particular Foo Fighters and Weather Report really stood out to me. And while I'm not Poochie's biggest fan, I do think the Heaven Plan and his twisted sense of justice were really interesting concepts to explore. Also, his stand was cool. Stands just continued to get more interesting with better designs throughout this part, and stands like Diver Down, Made in Heaven, Stone Free, and Weather Report are some of the most intriguing in the whole series. And just like in the rest of the parts that I placed in the top 3, I felt that the drama and humor were perfectly balanced so that one side never completely won out or took over the whole part. Also, that ending, bro. When I finished this part, I literally stared at the final panel and sobbed for a good 5 to 10 minutes. I don't care if that's embarrassing, it's true. What an amazing resolution to the original JoJo universe. I definitely won't say that this part is flawless though. The prison setting isn't as exciting as it maybe could have been compared to something like Impelled Down from One Piece, and I felt like the manga got more interesting as soon as they were out of the prison. Villain of the Week is also very present here, and some of the minor antagonists felt pretty shoehorned into the story if I'm being honest. Like, bruh, I don't care about Dio's stupid and dumb children. Also, why is Dio still the main villain like 6 parts into the series? I just don't get it, man. I don't even like Dio that much. He's okay, but like, he doesn't need to be in every part. However, I felt like these fights were a bit better than in other parts, and that was mainly due to how interesting and unique many of the stand abilities were. This is a fantastic part. I don't care what anybody has to say. If you haven't read it, read through it thoroughly and with the goal to understand it properly, and don't just skim through it so that you can get to part 7. Enjoy every part for what it is, or you're gonna miss out on some amazing things. And now we've reached the cream of the crop, the best of the best from the original JoJo universe. At number 2, of course, I have part 4, Diamond is Unbreakable. Part 4 is basically everything that's good about JoJo combined into one big arc. The second best protagonist in my opinion, amazing side characters like Rohan, Okuyasu, Jotaro, and Hayato, arguably the best villain in JoJo with Kira, amazing stand designs and much more intricate powers than in part 3, and a healthy mix of comedy and drama to make this arguably the most enjoyable part of them all. I really loved the slice of life approach to this part, and I felt that it really solved the villain of the week issue that popped up starting in part 3. And even though Kira doesn't appear until halfway through the part, I felt his presence all the way from the beginning, and he makes such an immediate impact that I don't really mind him taking some time to appear. This part also has a fantastic ending. I really enjoyed the fight between Josuke and Kira, as I said earlier, and I feel like it fixed basically every problem I have with Jotaro versus Dio. And seeing Jotaro release his rage on Kira was a great throwback to literally every fight in part 3. I don't have much to add. Part 4 is simply an amazing piece of fiction, and I can't recommend it enough. Oh boy, big surprise. At number 1, I have part 7, Steel Ball Run. This isn't just the best part in JoJo, but I consider it to be one of the greatest pieces of manga and fiction ever written. I put it on the same level as manga like Berserk or Monster, which are generally considered to be 2 of the greatest manga ever written. The plot is complicated without the different storylines becoming too crowded or stepping over each other, and I was constantly enraptured the entire time I was reading through it. Pretty much every character is fantastic, and characters like Johnny, Gyro, Valentine, and Diego are easily some of the best characters in the whole series. I personally think Johnny is the best protagonist in the whole series, Gyro is the best Jobro, and Valentine might just be the best villain. I really like Kira though. Stands evolved like crazy after part 6, and literally every ability is interesting and creates a really tense fight just by itself. D4C, Tusk, Mandum, Scary Monsters, those are some of the best examples. Every fight is charged with emotion and feels so much more significant than those from previous parts, and the entire final half with D4C, the Holy Corpse, and Love Train, and alternate Diego having the world, that was one of the best stretches of fiction I've ever witnessed. Personally, I just love reading through Johnny beating Valentine or Diego returning after literally dying over and over again. And I hate rereading stuff, so that's a really huge compliment. I could go on and on about this part. I think I'll just make a separate video, honestly, but this is by far the best JoJo part and is one of the best pieces of fiction ever. Just absolute greatness from Araki. And that's it for this list. Thanks so much if you made it all the way to the end, and please let me know what your ranking is in the comments. Next week's video will be on JoJo again, but let me know if you have any more video ideas as well. I'm currently reading Chainsaw Man. I'm done like 1 volume, so maybe we'll get some videos on that soon. Anyways, thank you for watching, and see you all next time. See ya.